We are fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. Let's try and class up this act a little bit. Unprofessional is the start of the show, so we need a dose of professionalism. We are lucky to have Charles Davis of CBS Sports, the NFL on CBS. You can also catch him on the Titans preseason broadcast, which we always look forward to in just a few months from now. Good morning, Charles. Thanks for stopping by.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. If you're trying to jump things up, class it up a little bit, you got to search a little bit farther, man.
Well, Charles, you have to understand how low the bar for class in this show is. So just anybody with a shred of dignity around here makes us look better as a product. So we appreciate you for that.
Well, I appreciate that. We probably should bring in another person then to do that because I'm going to probably ride with you.
That's fine. We'll take you. That's a hell of a teammate to have. Charles Davis here with us on 104.5 The Zone. So you got the opportunity to spend some time at practices in the last couple of weeks, Charles. What did you go in specifically looking for ahead of your preseason broadcast preparation?
Mainly, Buck, the thing I was going in there looking for, and it's just trying to, one, learn the roster. Now, obviously, there is some carryover, even though NFL football is way different than it was when we were growing up, right? With free agency and roster turnover and how things go. We never had that to this extent that we have year in, year out now in the NFL. So you're just trying to do that, see who the new people are. Obviously, you know who they are, but you want to see them at work. But in this case now, it's a brand new coaching staff. Head coach all the way down, brand new way of quote unquote doing things. Although, as we all know, football is football, but how the message gets transmitted, what the key things are that this staff wants that maybe the other staff didn't, or just different in how they do it. And it always comes down to when you have something new like this, when you have Brian Callahan in charge instead of Mike Vrabel, everyone's looking for, well, how is it different? What's the comparison? What is this? What is that? Bottom line is the Brian Callahan that I knew in Cincinnati and have known from before is that's the Brian Callahan I saw in early display there. He's not worried about comparisons. He's not worried about how it was quote unquote done before, other than just having historical knowledge. They want to do it their way, coach it their way, transmit it their way. And they're not saying right, wrong, or anything else. This is just how we plan to do it. And that's kind of refreshing for me.
And looking at the way that, you talk about not being the NFL that you grew up with necessarily or were a part of throughout the course of your career and how much different that is, that level of partnership almost that starts with the head coach and is related down to the players. How conducive do you think that dynamic is to a good working environment? Because football just seems like it's wired so, to its core with this hard-nosed kind of attitude, approach, line in the sand, do or die type of stuff. And to see somebody come in that's a little more, just a little more fluid, I guess is the word that I'll use, Charles, is definitely something refreshing. Certainly seems to be for the players to an extent based on our conversations with them in the last month and a half or so.
Yeah, and that's part of what happens all the time when things change. People move on, you bring a new person in. Oftentimes when you hire someone to replace, the differences get exemplified if they're differences that you're looking to add to your plays. So, Mike Vrabel did it one way. Brian Callahan's going to do it another. The team feels pretty good about what they're seeing so far out of Brian Callahan and how it's being done in comparison to what Mike Vrabel did before. But it's not, as you and I both know, it's not as black and white as that, oh, wow, I love it better this way than I did the other. The other way was appreciated in a lot of ways as well, but you weren't winning enough games down the stretch. So now here comes a new person, different message. Hey, maybe I can talk to this person different than I talk to the other person. That feels good, especially in the beginning. Now, will it hold up over time? That's the key for everyone, Brian Callahan and his staff can only do it the way that they can do it because that's who they are and that's how it goes down. But that seems to be exactly what Tennessee was looking for as a replacement for Mike Vrabel. But I think we can make that case almost everywhere, right, Buck? When you watch who was in charge before, if it wasn't going well, you could almost pretty much predict the next person in charge will be, I'm not going to say polar opposite, but there will be some differences that that they're looking for. Pick your sport, pick your teams, pick your coaching staff. We've all said it. Once one person goes out, almost every time you hire the opposite, that goes, you hire the opposite again, and it's almost a pendulum that swings back and forth. But that's just me and my old age kicking in a little bit. But I do think that there's some element of truth to that.
Charles Davis of the NFL on CBS is here with us on 104.5 The Zone. We're talking a little Titans this morning.
And Brian Callahan, Charles, has talked over and over again about the strategy of putting quarterbacks in comfortable situations, playing to their strengths, gaining feedback from those players, what works for them, what do they like. So with that in mind, what are you most looking forward to seeing Brian Callahan lean into when it comes to Will Levis's strengths in terms of what Callahan might be able to tap into this season?
Yeah, I think, if that's the way it's going to go down, which I think is a smart way of doing it, letting him have a little bit of, I hate the word ownership, but you're in it with us, and you're exactly right about Brian Callahan wanting to play to the strengths of that quarterback. And that's the thing we always have to keep in mind. You've got to know what those strengths are in order to play into them. And he's going to learn them, and he's learning them already. And it won't be that hard to do. But the things you're asking me that I think he's going to lean into, Will Levis likes to throw the ball downfield. This wide receiver core has the ability to get downfield, and especially when you throw in the tight end. All right. That doesn't mean that every time they throw the football, it's going to be a 30-yard pass downfield. That's not what I'm saying. But the idea that you've got a big, strong arm quarterback who likes to chuck it down there, you've got some receivers now who can go get it. They will be designing things up, scheming things up in order to exemplify that. That's when those guys get comfortable. Think about it this way. Every game that you hear us yackers talk about, right? We always talk about getting a quarterback comfortable early, the offense coordinator, give him some plays that he's comfortable with, and, get him some completions early, get his confidence up, especially if he struggled before, et cetera, et cetera. That almost always translates into what, guys? Swing passes, short check downs, 5-yard outs. You know what I'm talking about, right? But if you know your quarterback really well, sometimes their comfort zone might be something different. Mason Rudolph, the backup quarterback now in Tennessee, who I think will be the number 2 guy. I know he's in competition with Malik Willis. You know what his comfort zone is? From my years of watching Mason Rudolph? Deep fades and post routes. You want to get Mason Rudolph comfortable? Those throws he loves to make. Okay? So does that mean you call those automatically? Yeah, depends on situation. But you want him comfortable? Brian Callahan, he's going to call the ones that are comfortable for that quarterback. And I think with Levis, ultimately, it's being able to make some of those dagger throws downfield, because that's when he feels he's at his best.
So speaking of that competition, obviously you and Paul Burmeister will be keeping up with a lot of position battles throughout the course of the preseason, calling these games on TV. Is there any that comes to mind in terms of the top of the list, the most intriguing positional battles to watch with this team, whether it's the one with the most candidates, whatever comes to mind for you after taking in a few practices from the offseason program?
Yeah, I do think offensive line is going to be the fun one to watch. You've got one of the best coaches in the history of the NFL, and that's not hyperbole, in Bill Callahan. You guys have seen the sleds, right? The ones that Coach Callahan designed and marketed and patented and the whole thing. I mean, this man thinks offensive line, understands it as well as anyone out there. I do realize the guy in Philadelphia gets a lot of attention, and deservedly so. Let's not forget one of the all-time masters, and he works in Tennessee now. That offensive line is going to get a ton of it, because I think right now you'd say Cushenberry at center, Skoronski at left guard, and Latham at left tackle, barring injuries, is pretty well a lockdown deal, right?
Yeah.
Right guard, right tackle is going to be fun for the Titan fans to watch, because I don't think anything's locked down there. I don't want anybody to take, what they saw in OTAs and mini camps as the gospel, because some guys weren't full participants, et cetera, et cetera. But they're going to have to earn their spots. And they're going to want to get to it as quickly as possible to get an offensive line solidified. Because, guys, and anyone listening to our voices, if there's one spot that needs that continuity, take quarterback out of it, that you've got to have a working continuity where they know every move, everything you're going to do, and it's real simple, right? Where it gets boiled down, it's offensive line. I mean, those offensive linemen, the way that they move, the way that they react, the way that they have to work in concert, in tandem. If one guy goes one way, the other guy's got to know what the move is on the other side. It is offensive line. And that's why you're trying your best to get your 5 and keep them together, snap in and snap out, down in and down out. I mean, I can go chapter and verse on stories about offensive lines and the great ones in the past and how they just, didn't even have to speak to each other. They knew all the best moves, but those are the ones that stay together 2, 3, 4, 5 years together. Tennessee's trying to put one together that learns that in the beginning and hopefully can play to that standard that they can keep them together for a while.
There was definitely a compounding of issues because not only was, the offensive line insufficient here for the past couple of years, but the lineup kept changing, to your point, and that made things so much more difficult on the offensive unit, just trying to find some level of rhythm and continuity. Charles Davis here with us on 104.5 The Zone. We're talking a little bit of Titans. You can, of course, catch Charles and Paul Burmeister and Corey Curtis on the Titans preseason network broadcasts that are coming up in just a few weeks from now once we get training camp underway. The preseason games will start. 3 really fun games with a joint practice against the Seattle Seahawks here in town before that game at Nissan Stadium. To your point about the quarterbacks, Charles, just going back to Levis in particular, tough to evaluate him in a situation like his last year, but you take the sample size that you have. Where did you see him struggle the most with his comfort level? Muddy pockets, a pretty consistent theme for him, and any quarterback has to be adept at it. But beyond that and the pressure, the issues that those cause, what were you kind of looking to see him clean up year over year?
I just think, the word consistency can be overused because it feels like a great fallback word, but he's got to be able to develop that. And that only takes time and snaps. And I think that you articulate it very well. It's a small sample size right now. Sometimes I wondered to myself as I watched them progress down the stretch last year, that opener, that first game versus Atlanta maybe wasn't the greatest thing in the world for him. Because sometimes it feels like, we're crushing this bad boy. Now, I'm not saying that Will Levis walked away from the game going, boy, I've got this NFL down pat. But it does set you to your confidence level rises. It feels pretty good. And then next game is like, whoa, I didn't see that last time. Because that's what the NFL does. They see what you did before. They try and throw something at you haven't dealt with, see if you can pick it up and go. I do think the Miami game that we all point to, and rightly so, the numbers weren't tremendous, but the leadership was, the competitive spirit was, all that you're looking for from that quarterback. And let's not forget, he came out for the draft last year. There was an injury there. Played through a senior at Kentucky like that. Then you get into camp. He hurts an ankle. He can't get the snaps. Malik Willis takes almost every snap in preseason. So he's behind trying to catch up. And you guys know as well as anyone, trying to catch up when the season starts is very difficult to do because you can't get the reps involved. It's hard to do. This year, he'll be taking those reps. He'll be taking those reps and then some. How they do it in preseason for games, I don't know what Brian Callahan has planned yet. We'll see how that goes. But I do, as you said, I do like the preseason schedule. Quarterback aside, 3 NFC teams. And I think that's a good thing in a lot of ways. Because sometimes, conferences develop a style, develop how they do it. And now you're coming in. New Orleans is the last game. Obviously, the second game in Seattle, and you mentioned the joint practices. And the opener is, hit me again.
San Fran.
San Fran. You know what's interesting about them? 2 of the 3 are led by defensive coaches. Dennis Allen, Mike McDonald, a rookie coach in Seattle. Which means, as a general rule, hard-nosed, tough guys that you're going to play against, get after you as hard as they can, and coaches who want their offenses to run the football because that's what defense coaches typically like. Now, again, it's not 100%. Flip it over to the other side, you get Kyle Shanahan, and you got everything coming at you. Now, obviously, it's preseason. Who's going to run the team? You're not likely to see Purdy and McCaffrey and all them, but all the guys who are going to try and make the team, you get that myriad of things coming at you from Kyle Shanahan. So your defensive side of the ball, Denard Wilson's crew, that gets a heck of a look in that first game. So it's going to be fun to watch. I'm excited about it. Will Levis, yes, he will be the focus. But overall with this team, and I think that they're a team that they remind me a little bit of Tampa right now for this reason. General manager at Tampa has said on record, Everybody keeps telling us we're not all that good, and we just won the division last 2 years. And again, you're picking someone else for this year. Fine, we'll just keep operating this way. Tennessee's not quite in the same spot because they won the division the last 2 years. But on paper and what we've seen early, one person's opinion, mine, it's a better roster than what they're probably getting credit for nationally. And if they can get off to a good start, they could be lying in wait for some people in a really, really volatile division.
Well, the volatility of the division is going to be as fun a thing as we've had around here in a while, Charles, just because the Texans, will go in with a favorite, and they should justifiably be so for what they were able to accomplish with C.J. Stroud having such a spectacular rookie year. But Trevor Lawrence on the heels of this contract, Anthony Richardson, a giant question mark, Will Levis definitely a question mark to an extent, but all four teams very, very competitive right now. Coming out of a season where three of the four were highly competitive and basically in the hunt graphic until the very end. In the case of Indianapolis, with Lawrence though, there was never any other decision in your mind. I would imagine, unless you're going to correct me here, that Trevor Lawrence was going to be the guy in Jacksonville. Yes.
No, I agree with that totally. Here's the interesting part. I actually last week spent some time with a former GM in the league who had success as a GM in the league, okay? And he said the biggest conundrum you're going to have as a GM, you're going to have a million things thrown at you. But when you have a quarterback like Trevor Lawrence, okay, and you have that quarterback up and the money's, you've got to pay the money, it looks like, et cetera. But what if you know in your heart he's really not the guy? Can you have the backing of your administration? Can you have the chutzpah to hold in there and go, yeah, we're not going to sign him? And everyone loses their mind because there aren't many, right? There aren't many. And he's like, and know what he said his thing was? Can he get me to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl? He said that really should be the ultimate question. The problem is because there aren't many of those guys who are locked down, yes, they can win the Super Bowl. They're going to make this money because that quarterback you're about to sign is better than a lot of the other quarterbacks, and now you're hoping to make it up somewhere else. And he said, here's the kicker. Okay, we're going to sign him. We'll get better in other places, and that'll make him better, and we'll be okay somehow. But I just signed him for all this money, so I don't have money to sign those other people. So it's one of those deals. But to your point, because of that, you're going to tell me you're not going to sign the guy that you drafted number one, who has shown the flashes. Consistency went out the window a little bit last year, I think in a large part due to injuries. But guess what? I'm going to say no, and then who am I going to acquire? So a lot of these contracts get done based on that, and the quarterbacks are benefiting from it.
He is Charles Davis. He is, as expected, infinitely more professional than this radio show has been at the start of the morning. And
a breath of fresh air.
His analysis as a result. You can catch him on the Titans preseason broadcast. The preseason for Tennessee begins at home August the 10th against the San Francisco 49ers. WKRN News 2 is where you can watch them here in Nashville. And, of course, you can hear Charles and watch Charles throughout the course of the season on the NFL on CBS. Thank you so much for your time, my friend. It's always good to chat with you.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Please tell everyone hello for me back there, and look forward to getting back there for the preseason and hopefully some during the regular season. And I'm as excited about Brian Callahan and staff being there as everyone else is who's a Titans fan. He's earned this opportunity. I think he's going to do quite well in it. Take care.
That's the main man. Nailed the dismount. Charles Davis with us on 104.5 The Zone. So, speaking of things that have impressed, let's talk about some undrafted rookie free agents that have stood out throughout the course of the last month and a half, one in particular from the University of Tennessee. I'm Buck Reising. It's 104.5 The Zone.